August 1939. Europe hangs on a powder keg. Political alliances are cracking, treaties are crumbling, old promises ring hollow. Behind this visible backdrop, secret reshuffles lurk. Diplomats in cabinets, icons on influence maps, secret annexations, and night operations designed to allow one power to attack another and appear the victim. Thus began the massive conflict we call World War II, a pact no one expected, a non-aggression with secret contents. On August 23, 1939, German and Soviet foreign ministers Joachim von Ribbentrop and Vyacheslav Molotov signed an official non-aggression pact. In plain sight, the peace document, "We will not attack each other." But this agreement contained a hidden, secret section, an additional protocol dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, and in essence envisioning the partition of Poland between Berlin and Moscow. For Hitler, this was a strategic maneuver to secure his eastern flank before advancing westward, eliminate the risk of a two-front war, and gain freedom of action against Poland. For Stalin, it was an opportunity to recapture territories lost after World War I, expand the USSR's sphere of influence, and gain time to prepare for a possible future war with Germany. Publicly, it was a non-aggression pact. Privately, a deal that destroyed the independence and integrity of neighboring states. The Germans understood that massive aggression required not only an army, but also legitimization in the eyes of their own people in the international community. Therefore, in the last week of August, a series of staged attacks began, simulating the aggression of Polish saboteurs. The operation, one of its elements, was codenamed Operation Himmler. The most famous of these provocations is the so-called Gleiwitz incident. On the night of August 31, 1939, Special Forces seized a radio station in Gleiwitz, broadcast a short anti-Polish message, and left the bodies of people in Polish uniforms. It later became known, including from testimony at the Nuremberg trials, that this was staged by the Session Gestapo, a pure provocation designed to obtain evidence of Polish aggression. The morning of September 1, 1939, the first shot and the Blitz operation. Early in the morning of September 1, at dawn, the German Navy bombarded Polish fortifications in Danzig, the port of Gdansk, a symbolic and de facto signal to begin the offensive. That same day, hundreds of thousands of German soldiers, supported by air power and tank units, crossed almost the entire Polish border. The operation was meticulously planned and based on the principle of lightning warfare, blitzkrieg, the use of air power, tanks, and motorized infantry to quickly break through and encircle the enemy. Germany demonstrated overwhelming superiority in training, equipment, and combat experience. Poland put up fierce resistance. Cities, border fortifications, and individual garrisons fought steadfastly. For example, the heroic multi-day resistance of the Westerplatte Island garrison and the defense of the Danzig post office are well known. However, the enemy's numerical and technical superiority, coordination problems, and outdated Polish equipment seriously limited the capabilities of the Polish forces. Germany's attack on Poland became a decisive test of the European guarantee system. Earlier, after the occupation of Czechoslovakia, Great Britain and France had provided Poland with written security guarantees. When it became clear that Germany had attacked, both powers presented Germany with an ultimatum and, after its rejection, formally declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. However, the declaration of war did not result in immediate and large-scale military support. Great Britain and France began mobilization, declared an economic and naval blockade, and conducted limited operations, for example, against German naval forces in the Baltic and North Seas. But no major offensive operations in support of Poland followed. Military assistance from the air and on land was effectively unable to turn the tide. This period went down in history as the Phony War, or Miraculous War. Ground operations on the Western Front were modest in scale. There were promises, but not enough. The German armies achieved significant successes in the first few days. Tank spearheads broke through defensive lines, disrupted communications, and encircled and destroyed Polish garrisons. Despite their courage and tenacity, the Polish forces were forced to retreat, covering the evacuation of civilians and command posts. Fierce fighting erupted in port areas and along the coast, with artillery shelling and bombing destroying infrastructure and cities. The Polish command attempted to counterattack and establish new defensive lines, but ran into shortages of ammunition, fuel, and communications equipment. In some areas, the Poles managed to temporarily slow the Wehrmacht's advance, but these successes were limited. By mid-month, the Germans had already penetrated deep into Poland, seeking to encircle and destroy large Polish formations. Encirclements took place around major cities and transport hubs. The battle for Warsaw was underway, and the capital became the center of a fierce defense. Regimental and reserve infantry, civilian volunteers, and the remnants of the army held the city under the harshest conditions of bombing and artillery shelling. At this moment, a key factor, predetermined by the secret protocol between Germany and the USSR, emerged. While the Polish army was being exhausted and worn down in battles with the Wehrmacht, Soviet troops were concentrating in the east. On September 17, 1939, the Red Army crossed the border into eastern Poland, announcing its intervention to protect Ukrainians and Belarusians and to restore order. Phrases propagated by Moscow. In fact, this move effectively closed the corridor. Poland found itself between two powerful armies, with no chance of successfully coordinating resistance. Under attack from both sides with communication lines completely destroyed and supplies lost, the Polish forces gradually surrendered, encircled groups capitulated, and the country's leadership was forced to evacuate to Romania and then into exile. The last organized Polish group ceased to be combat-ready in early October. The official date for the end of the campaign and the final capitulation is often given as early October 1939. The last military clashes were recorded in early October. As a result of the partition of Poland, its territory was divided between two aggressors. The western and central territories went to Germany, the eastern ones to the Soviet Union. Poles were effectively erased from the world map for many years. Millions of people fell under the occupation regime, followed by mass deportations, persecution, and repression against those who resisted the occupation. Arrests, executions, and deportations deep into the USSR began, as well as repression by the German occupation authorities. Political purges, persecution of the intelligentsia in the Jewish population, the destruction of cultural and economic infrastructure. The human cost of the campaign amounted to tens and hundreds of thousands of killed and wounded soldiers and a huge number of civilian casualties. These events set the tone for the entire subsequent war. Large-scale repressions, ethnic cleansing, and unprecedented military action in the occupied territories. Historians offer varying estimates of losses and reprisals. For a general picture, see museum and academic overviews of the campaign and pre-war treaties. Britain and France did not save Poland. After declaring war, they were indeed unable to organize large-scale ground support in a timely manner. The reasons were complex and multi-layered. Battlefield status. Initially, the Allies lacked the necessary concentration of mechanized forces in rapid formations for an immediate and effective counteroffensive. The French command preferred a fortified defense, the Maginot Line, and feared losing its rear. The British Army on the continent was limited in numbers. Fear of a large-scale war, caution in taking risks, dependence on economics and the time required for mobilization. To summarize, the declaration of war was an important political step, but it did not save Poland in a practical military sense. After the war, historians and investigators gathered evidence that clearly demonstrated, through both legal proceedings and archival documents, that the Gleiwitz provocation and similar episodes were a staged production by Hitler's secret services, while the secret protocol of the Molotov Pact was a real agreement on the division of spheres of influence. The Pact documents are available in historical archives. The testimonies of those involved in the operation and the Nuremberg trials also became sources for our modern understanding of these events. The outbreak of war in September 1939 was more than just a morning tank raid. It was a carefully planned political and military campaign, from diplomacy with secret annexes to provocations that served as a pretext for attack. This is an example of how diplomatic agreements can conceal true, contradictory intentions. how propaganda and special operations are used to justify aggression, and how even the bravest efforts of small countries can be thwarted if the enemy is better prepared and operates on both sides. But this was only the beginning of a major war.